Good morning, good afternoon, bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation, Recovering Hope and Agency in the Disorienting Dilemma of Immigration as an IEHP. Now, before we begin this presentation today, we'd like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 and St. Paul University are located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them in this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land as well. My name is Andrew Tomeyer. I am N4's Education Coordinator. I'll be hosting and moderating today's presentation. As well, we have my colleague and co-host, Colleen Drake, Engagement Coordinator, who will be monitoring the Q&A box today. I'm now pleased to introduce you to today's presenters, and I'm going to ask that you turn on your video as I introduce you. Dr. Bianca Bricchio, PhD, is an assistant professor at the School of Leadership, Ecology, and Equity at St. Paul University in Ottawa, Ontario. Her work focuses on integral leadership development through emotional and social intelligence, mindfulness, compassion, and systems thinking. Her PhD is in cultural mediations, where she specializes in interdisciplinary approaches for intercultural competence. Bianca is interested in transformative leadership and the cultivation of human potential in all areas of intelligence. She has 7 peer-reviewed publications on mindfulness, compassion, gender equality, and transformative practices for resilience, care, and well-being. Bianca is also a certified coach in EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence and leadership. As well, we have Dr. Lorraine St. Marie, adjunct professor at the School of Leadership, Ecology, and Equity at St. Paul University in Ottawa as well. She's held a number of academic and leadership roles throughout her 20-plus years with SPU. She continues to be actively involved in forging educational partnerships between N4 and St. Paul University, first with our certificate program in immigration and integration, and currently with our most recent program, Fostering Canadian Integration for Internationally Educated Healthcare Professionals. Lorraine's research and teachings bring together resources from a number of disciplines in both human sciences and theology in her ongoing search for strengthening ways to cultivate hospitable learning environments and develop transformative leadership capacity. Welcome. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform. We'll share this with you as soon as it becomes available. Should there be any technical issues during this presentation, we'll inform you with details for an alternate makeup session. As well, before we begin today's event, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features to help enhance your participation experience. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write any questions you may have to the Q&A window. We know that sometimes many of you might have the same question or be interested in a particular response. Today, you have the option of upvoting a question. Please upvote questions you're interested in hearing the answer to, and we'll prioritize which questions we pose to the speakers first. With that said, our speakers have no conflicts of interest to declare, and no relevant financial relationships exist. So with that, I'm going to pass the podium over to Bianca and Lorraine. Take it away.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Andrew, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be able to communicate the results of these research with people who are directly interested and probably could benefit from it. And also, I hope that some of our participants in the research were able to join this webinar as well. This would be very rewarding if they did so. So as you saw in the title that Andrew presented, our topic in this research is Recovering Hope and Agency in the Disorienting Dilemma of Immigration as IEHP. And it is not news to many of you joining us today that it's notoriously difficult for internationally educated healthcare professionals to enter the Canadian healthcare system. And despite the acute understaffing in the Canadian healthcare system, there are serious difficulties for international medical graduates, both doctors and nurses, to find a career in their field. And there is this gap between Canadian immigration policies that encourage highly skilled migration, such as IEHP, and the reality that they face once they arrive to Canada to navigate the complex rules and policies in order to enter the Canadian healthcare system. So many of IEHPs spend years navigated through a licensure process that does not necessarily ensure them a fair workplace. And as a result of these problems, they constantly live this disorienting dilemmas of professional requalification and cultural adaptation. And as you can see here in this slide, these are results that we also got from a pan-Canadian report published by N4 in 2023, and the report mapped several diverse and complex barriers that IEHPs face in attempting the licensure process, such as the cost of licensure, provincial differences in regulations that undermine people's mobility, discrepancies between immigration programs and employers, culture and language differences, requirements for recency of practice, not having the possibility to enter residency here in Canada, lack of proper information and trustworthy information, and some people also experience different forms of discrimination. So the consequences of what we call these cluster of different problems that make it very difficult for IEHPs to enter the healthcare system have or I would say that the consequences are the direct impact on their functioning, on their well-being, on their resilience as well, and people report high levels of distress and loss of confidence in trying to face a lot of these problems. And there is a lack of community and a sense of isolation that they experience once they arrive here, especially for those who are in their first few years after arriving. And we use this word disorienting dilemma, which is a word used in transformative learning definitions, because disorienting dilemmas refers to this experience of being in a situation where what you know is right or what you know should happen doesn't happen. And this is what makes it very difficult for people to live, because we would like the reality to respond to us in a way that we expect and to support our growth and our belonging in this sense. So we will talk more about the disorienting dilemma, and Lorraine in particular. There is a loss of trust in one's professional identity as people try to find their way through various, obstacles that they need to face. The more obstacles they face, the more of a sense of losing trust in themselves and in their capacities. Although they know that they have them, the fact that they are not recognized by the system here can have this negative impact on their professional identity. And this is especially difficult for people, for healthcare professionals, because their profession is not only let's say a job, but it's very directly connected to their personal identity and their vocation and their sense of meaning in the world. So this can lead to experiences of depression, anxiety, and even a traumatic loss of purpose and agency, right? A sense that no matter how much I tried, the system still works against me. And then people move into these difficult emotional experiences. And this is what we are going to address in our presentation today. So in response to this underutilization and de-skilling of immigrants in health-related occupations in Canada, N4 partnered with St. Paul University, where me and Lorraine belong, in 2022 to offer a program for accompanying internationally educated health professionals as they navigate challenges involved in meeting certification requirements. And this is a 12-week online program that aims to strengthen participants' non-clinical skills and knowledge in order to support their successful integration in the Canadian healthcare system. And this was designed and delivered through the Institute for Transformative Leadership at St. Paul University. The overall aim of the program is to engage IEHPs in a transformative learning experience in order to gain self-awareness, non-clinical skills, and a greater sense of agency. And some of the modules that you see here on the screen include self-reflection on one's worldview, understanding the role of or the impact of trauma and immigration, learning how to reflect and build their resilience, understanding the story of Canada's multicultural society, and starting with Indigenous peoples, with Canada's First Nations, engaging in the story of the Canadian healthcare system and understanding more about how it works and its own processes of change, and especially in some cases why, trying to answer the question, why is it so difficult to enter the system, the fact that it's a cluster of many different policies and decisions, ethics and social justice, and interpersonal communication. And our presentation that you will see today, we would like to share with you the impact of transformative learning processes on those who participated. We had, in this particular research, we engaged with 3 different cohorts, 2 in English and 1 in French, exploring this impact of the transformative learning processes that were built in the program. And as we went through the analysis of the data, or I shouldn't call them the data, they are people sharing their stories with us, but we engaged with 17 participants in focus groups after they finished their modules. And we also included in this research an analysis of their work. So each module has an end of module journal where people give their responses to the topics that are presented in the module. And we coded the results of their answers and analyzed them according to these 5 different steps in transformative learning. And the first one is that experience of disorienting dilemma. And disorienting dilemma is that life experience where we have to go through some form of transformation because things do not happen our way, right? And so we are faced with new realities, we are faced with new ways of understanding, and then we are almost, sometimes we are thrown into it without our desire to do so. Sometimes we are willingly entering a process of transformation. And the second step we analyzed was the self-reflection, and how self-reflection can become a tool of empowerment and how it helps people move through these understanding of their lives and understanding of their contexts in which they live, and what is their role, and understanding also their life stories and making more sense of what is happening in their current reality. The third phase of transformation is a critical assessment of assumptions. So as people go through this learning process that we call transformative learning, and engage with self-reflection, they start becoming much more aware of their biases, of their limited understandings, right? They become aware of the limits of their knowledge and some of the assumptions that they had about the world. And the fourth step is building a sense of community. We found this was really important for people to participate in cohorts. We have about 80 participants in the English modules and up to 60 in the French modules, building a sense of community with other participants, and also a sense of community with their what we call lead learners, or their facilitators, teachers, professors. So the last step we analyzed was exploring new ways of being in the world. And this is the desired outcome of transformative learning. It's not only about the accumulation of knowledge in a particular field, which is a valid type of learning in itself, or particular I would say disciplines, but in this case, when it's about engaging the person in a process of transformation, exploring new ways of being in the world is really an essential outcome of transformation, where we can have a more expanded view of the world, where we see different aspects that we may not have known before, and when we can make decisions differently about things that truly matter to us. And in the end, we analyze these particular, 5 different stages of transformation according to 3 levels of changes in worldview. So the first one is the cognitive level of change in worldview, where we analyzed how people changed their way of thinking, what happened in their assumptions about the world, what happened in their understanding about themselves, their thought processes, and Lorraine will share with you what we found in this area. The second area of transformation we discovered was emotional or affective, how people were able to get more in touch with what they felt, to make meaning out of what they felt, and to be able sometimes to shift some of those difficult or painful emotions into emotions that allow them different choices. And the third level of transformation we discovered is what is called conative. It's a word that is not very common, but that means action-based. So now moving from the thought to the emotional level to the action out in the world, we explored how people saw themselves now after this particular program, and what kind of decisions they saw they were able to make. And this is where we discovered that recovery of agency and a different sense of purpose that participants were sharing with us. So I will invite now Lorraine to continue sharing.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to be sharing the findings of the 5 phases that Bianca has shared. And I'm going to begin each of those phases by just sharing a little bit about what literature says about these particular phases, so that we can again situate the findings, what our participants have reported. So I begin with disorienting dilemma. And literature states that the starting point for transformative learning is, as Bianca has said, a disorienting dilemma, one that can be triggered by life events, by changes of circumstances or perspectives, or by an existential crisis. And so it implies a sense of dissatisfaction with one's habitual meaning-making system, a growing awareness of the inconsistencies between one's worldview and new challenges that can be experienced as chaotic and disorienting. And so this was evident in research participants sharing of a number of challenges that they faced. And the first one was the difficult life decisions, uncertainty about the future, anxiety, difficult emotions. Now, the effort to make meaning out of adversity, including the experience of conflicting situations that are both internal and external. And here we talk about contradictions between myth and reality, between what they believed or had been led to believe about their immigration here in Canada, and the actual reality that they faced. They face many contradictions about also gaining immigration points for credentials, in contrast with a long and difficult process of being licensed. They also see a huge need for healthcare professionals, and they really want to be engaged, and yet they face that enormous barriers that are actually then contradictory to what they are actually seeing. Because of the many barriers that they face, participants then grieve the loss of their professional meaning and vocation, much more than other aspects of their immigration experience. And Bianca, if you could just go back to the other slide, that's great. Thank you. So to go back, so they, because of the barriers, and they grieve the loss of their professional meaning and vocation much more than other aspects of their immigration experience. And this shows the importance, as Bianca has said, of their medical profession to their core identity. I remember one participant saying, "I'm 80% a doctor. That's how I identify myself." So in order to be licensed, they must go through a process then of reprofessionalization. That for some, that process is experienced as a top-down cultural assimilation. And here again, we meet the contradiction and paradox in that Canada presents itself to be a multicultural society, yet this seems to be much more aspirational than actual, as many experience their workplace as predominantly monocultural, in which minorities are assimilated into the predominant culture. And this then leads to a loss of confidence and self-esteem. So we'll now go to the quotes on the next slide. So here we see a quote from one of the participants. I moved to Canada in 2005 and was just focusing on getting the license, but the only thing I was missing was my practice. I am just counting the years, and that shaken my self-confidence, brought me low self-esteem to the level that I didn't want to talk about this subject with my family back home when they called. All right, the next phase is the phase of self-reflection. It involves processes for becoming aware of one's assumptions, strengths, and vulnerabilities in both their personal and professional domain. So throughout the program, learners are offered content and reflective exercises to carefully examine their own stories and practices, to draw out how past experiences connect to their current dilemma of finding their place within the Canadian healthcare system. All participants reported that the various exercises for self-reflection helped to strengthen their self-awareness and sense of purpose. They became more open to understanding themselves and to commit to the learning process that the program offered. They noted the power and efficacy of such self-reflection for sustaining them in their pathways towards licensing. So here they reported that self-reflection did lead to more self-awareness, and many participants began the program with little experience of self-reflection. One participant candidly reported they initially felt uncomfortable with going inside themselves, and yet when they followed the guiding exercises, they became more open and self-aware. Another one openly welcomed the reflective process as what they called a compass of introspection that allowed them to remember their identity and real personality in the midst of having experienced prejudice that is a demotivating stressor. They also noted that self-reflection led to increased self-confidence, hope, and resilience. And so 7 participants reported that the content and reflective exercises allowed them to become more hopeful and confident in their resilience and ability to navigate challenging circumstances, including their licensing pathway. They also reported that self-reflection affirmed their skills and purpose. So 20 participants reported that writing their own stories and reflecting on their experiences helped them to affirm their respective gifts, skills, competencies, and purpose in the healthcare setting. It also gave them opportunities to discover their latent capacity and skills, and even deficiencies in supposed areas of strength. They enhanced their commitment. This enhanced their commitment to the learning journey and their path for integration here in Canada. We also heard that self-reflection led to increased awareness of their vulnerabilities, needed skills, and abilities. So the study showed that this provided a space to raise awareness of their vulnerabilities as well as the skills that they needed to foster to better engage in their healthcare profession. We heard that it also led to greater emotional intelligence. And so 8 participants specifically noted the value of growing their abilities to reflect on their emotions. Here we see how reflection on stressful situations has allowed them to appreciate how emotions reveal patterns of behavior that they hold unconsciously in place by personal meanings and knowledge frameworks that actually hinder their ability to successfully navigate the current context. And finally, self-reflection surfaced patterns of behaviors. They noted that these behaviors, in their behaviors, they noted that for 3 of them, they were avoiding conflict or conversations that they considered confrontational. And so their increased self-awareness actually strengthened their resolve to better understand the nature of conflict and to practice interpersonal skills for promoting transformation in their engagement with conflict. And we now see 2 quotes. The first one, the second module, discussed the traumatic impact of displacement and let me discover how resilient I am. It gave me hope and courage to continue my learning journey after a period of despair. Another reports this program has helped me to let go of my emotions that were keeping me stuck in my own reality. I realize now that I am not the only immigrant living the shock of our current reality. And so the next phase is the critical assessment of assumptions and worldviews. This entails uncovering and questioning one's assumptions and worldviews that actually create unconscious boundaries around what one defines as the truth. And so for transformative learning to occur, there must be opportunities for questioning existing frames of reference and for reassessing one's beliefs, biases, and prejudices. So as with self-reflection, this phase can be challenging work in that it forces learners to examine their certitudes and values that shape their ways of understanding and unconsciously regulate or normalize their decisions and actions. We often refer to assumptions as expectations and values that are embedded in the worldviews that shape how a person thinks the world works and how we think that it should work. So participants noted that some of the key learnings in the program included a greater understanding of Indigenous peoples in Canada and the many ways in which Indigenous peoples have been and continue to be marginalized and racialized. 4 participants specifically noted how this learning allowed them to critically assess their own personal and systemic biases, thereby expanding their existing worldviews. As one participant reported, my worldview now includes Indigenous peoples and their rituals as possible avenues for healing. And another has said, I have gained a better perspective about Indigenous peoples. This was the first time of learning about them, their history, and their culture. I had made a lot of assumptions about them before coming to this program, but now I am more knowledgeable and confident to talk about them and work with them as I integrate into the Canadian communities. 6 participants explicitly recognized how critical assessment of their assumptions and values had led to recognizing the importance of good communication based on cultural competence and humility in modifying their practice. One participant in particular noted a greater appreciation for the need for what we call cultural humility and recognizing our own limitations and prejudices in such a diverse context. Another reported that their expanding understanding and worldview in terms of different cultures, beliefs, and worldview is very helpful and feels better equipped to engage and to collaborate in a multicultural setting. And so here we have another quote where we read that I see society and the barriers that I encounter differently. It is no longer like society is mistreating me. I am now considering the society. It is part of my life, of my way of seeing reality. I have more confidence and am more optimistic for my journey, and my area of concern has broadened. Bianca, if we could just go back to the other slide, there's another piece on that I did want to lift, actually in keeping with that quote, where as some experience then a shift, we can say, in their perspective or assumptions through the program as they reflected on the content, in light of what they already knew and believed about themselves. One participant referred to their experience of learning and unlearning and said that it was like throwing away old things and starting to absorb new knowledge about their new context and healthcare. And this experience then gave them a renewed courage and to engage with the challenges of their new social and professional context. And another noted that I am now able to view my own past beliefs with more objective eyes as a result of this critical evaluation of my presumptions. And so what that led them to say was that they found that this allowed them to become unstuck in unproductive behaviors and to stop taking the challenging situations as personal attack. And as we saw in that quote in that other slide, we saw then that critical reflection moved them from a sense of victimhood paralysis to an increased sense of agency, confidence, and hope. Okay, so we'll go on to the learning community. Thank you. Transformative learning processes then take place within a learning community that promotes openness and trust. And so literature shows that learning communities create opportunities for authentic dialogue and discussion, mentoring, and feedback. So most IEHPs arrive in Canada without a supportive network and peers, colleagues, and mentors. Many of them feel isolated and lost, and this sense of isolation creates both, we can say, an ontological and a professional insecurity. And the experience of belonging to a community, especially one that shares their concerns and struggles, is crucial when people go through disorienting dilemmas and the difficult liminal periods of transformation. Some have a sense of being held in such a community, and as we will see, some did report that. So being part then of that large group of people, of that community, going through that disorienting dilemma, sharing a similar purpose then, had a strong impact on three levels. The first is on the emotional level of overcoming isolation and experiencing a sense of belonging. The second is on networking and information sharing. And the third is the sense of safety that comes from being seen and witnessed for who they were in the program by both their peers and the program's lead learners. And as Bianca mentioned, we refer to our instructors as lead learners, recognizing that although each are content experts, each of us are also on a learning journey with the program participants. So all the participants highlighted the important role of the learning community on the program. For some, sharing similar experiences of adversity, frustration, and disappointment in a community in which they had a sense of belonging was a source of hope, greater agency, and self-confidence. One reported, "This is a relief. I no longer feel it transforms my way of seeing and myself as isolated or lost in an ocean." Another stressed the sense of strength they felt when realizing that their struggles were shared by a large number of other IEHPs. So there's a sense of shared identity. Bianca, if we could just go back to the other slide, that would be great. Thank you. They highlighted their appreciation for the engagement and encouragement of their lead learners, as we mentioned. What was interesting and actually quite disheartening was that many participants shared their stories of not being seen or acknowledged in their asking questions to various institutions, sending emails, engaging in interviews, sending applications, and receiving absolutely no acknowledgement or answer. And this lowered their self-confidence because they felt invisible. So they responded with gratitude to the feedback and recognition that they did receive because they really did feel heard. They were also encouraged by the vulnerable sharing of lead learners' own experiences of disorienting dilemmas and resilience. So relationships then that were created through the learning community with other peers, but also in forming networks with others both within and outside the community itself. So here on the next slide, we see then that I am strengthened with the understanding that the journey of professional integration is not a lonely journey, that there is a community of people on the same track. And I want to say that support of people is very important, especially for newcomers because of the stress and trauma that we all have. It is great that we have this group where we can find friends and meet colleagues with the same aims and interest. And finally, the last phase is the exploration of new possibilities. And so this is an opportunity to explore alternative ways of being and living in terms of relationships, roles, and actions. So our research has shown that the program has led to a greater sense of agency moving into purposeful action. 10 participants reported a commitment to taking concrete actions in their continuing exploration of new roles, responsibilities, and ways of living. All of them named a renewed commitment to ongoing learning, and some reported that the program then helped them to identify gaps in their knowledge, therefore impelling them to explore more resources and continue to engage in similar learning processes to keep them on that path, as a way of keeping them on that path towards complete integration. Others specifically noted that they were committed to seeking out and tutoring or mentoring, forming study groups to help prepare them for upcoming exams. And in making purposeful choices, participants noted their appreciation for gaining a new and more expansive perspective on their situation and on the Canadian context. This led to declaring a commitment to changing their habitual forms of communication practices to ensure their listening and speaking practices were inclusive and beneficial to all, for those with whom they are in relationship. Back to you, Bianca.
Thank you, Lorraine, for guiding us through this. And I will share with you now the overall outcomes of the research as you witness the details that Lorraine shared with you. So if we go back to those 3 different levels in which we try to identify where transformation was happening for participants, we came to the recognition that many of them reported an increase in self-awareness, right? So knowing more about their patterns, about their stories, about becoming more aware of what was important to them. So this is at the level of cognitive transformation, right? At the level of knowledge and thinking and intellectual development as well. We also noticed an increase in critical reflection, the fact that participants were able to become more aware of their biases and assumptions and be able to change them, because this is the beauty of critical reflection, where we discover that what we believe about other people is not reflecting the reality of those people, or what we believe about the reality may not reflect it necessarily. An increase in intercultural knowledge, so understanding more about Indigenous peoples, for example, was one area of cognitive transformation where participants were starting to understand this area of a certain population in Canada that they were not very much aware of. And the other aspect of cognitive transformation was that ability to act with more intentionality. And what that means is that many times we may behave in life according to certain impulses or duties or ideologies without really connecting our decisions with our true values and intentions. And that process of cognitive transformation allowed participants to be much more aware of what was truly important to them, so that they could make decisions that were directly connected to that intention. And this is what leads us to emergence of agency, because this is how we define agency, when we can do things and we can make decisions that truly matters to us, and that we can take in full freedom and awareness, rather than, you know, being forced or being guided by certain habits or ideologies. The second area of transformation was emotional transformation. And This is the place where participants became more aware of their difficult emotions, the fact that some of them were experiencing depression or anxiety or just a pervading loss of self-confidence. And this was creating, I would say that the program created a space in which they could engage with these difficult emotions, right? They could take the time to reflect, to share what they were feeling. And this awareness led to, again, a greater intentionality about how they felt, finding ways, for example, to reduce those difficult emotions by engaging in various forms of self-care practices or relying on the learning community to have a sense of belonging and understanding their difficult emotions. And what that awareness created was a recovery of hope and a sense of resilience, because once they were not what painful emotions create, they almost create this constriction of our vision and of our ability to engage with other people. And once they were able to recover more hope and witness the experiences of other people in the program, they were able to tap more into their resilience and to make decisions and actions that contributed to their resilience. The processes of self-reflection and understanding trauma responses and trauma adaptations led also to more compassionate relating to themselves and others. So understanding their own suffering and finding ways to address it, and understanding how people's way of feeling and their way of being in the world is very much affected by their circumstances, which is what a trauma-informed practice is teaching people. It also increased their empathy and a sense of belonging to others in the space of sharing with others their difficult experiences, but also their hopes and different possibilities. The third level of transformation was so going from the head to the heart, or the emotion, and to the will, which is the action-based, what we do with who we are. Self-awareness led to more freedom of choice for participants, and it also led to an increased sense of agency. And what we mean by an increased sense of agency and hope is that participants didn't feel as stuck as many of them felt as the beginning of the program. You had this opening of possibilities, and 2 or 3 persons in different cohorts, which I found interesting, referred to the program as the light at the end of the tunnel. We didn't really give people what they wanted the most, which was a job, but at the same time, that accompaniment process was helping them deal with this difficult situation and with their own, responses. That also allowed them to envision new possibilities and to have a little bit more freedom in thinking that there are other choices for them as well, and there are more possibilities. And I will lead into conclusion in terms of this research. We discovered that the transformative learning approaches in the program that I described in the beginning, it's called Fostering Canadian Integration for IEHPs, from learning to action. So these approaches supported participants in moving through those disorienting dilemmas of immigration and finding employment in the healthcare system by offering accompaniment and transformation at these different levels. And the main areas of impact that we found really relevant for people was that recovery of hope, agency, and resilience. And the recovery of hope is particularly important because as people face a lot of obstacles, that can lead to a sense of hopelessness that, again, would further lead into depression and would undermine their ability to pursue finding a position in the healthcare. So that recovery of hope is, I would say, is that engine that drives people forward to move towards a goal that they had as they came to Canada. Increased self-awareness is also a capacity that was emerging as a result of the transformative learning approaches. And as Lorraine mentioned, for many participants, it was something new to take the time to engage in self-reflection and actually looking at themselves and their own lives, which was leading to that increased self-awareness and more inclusive worldviews. And more inclusive worldviews means that they became more aware of their own prejudices and became more aware that every person has a story behind them, right? So even in understanding these trauma-informed approaches, the idea that we need to have these inclusive worldviews in which we open ourselves to understanding the stories of others, which is connected to increased compassion. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, compassion for themselves, right? So understanding their own difficulties and sometimes addressing them with the right approaches and the right support, and compassion for others in terms of understanding that many immigrants come to Canada with particular stories and experiences, and Indigenous peoples as well have their own story of traumatization. And lastly, this created more intentional choices, because agency is leading to more intentional choices that are aligned with what is truly important for participants. And as you see in the diagram here, I would want to make the connection between the areas of impact and the CanMEDS framework that was created by the Royal College of Physicians in Canada, because some of what we call soft skills are really essential skills that support professional skills, and sometimes if they are missing, that can lead to a real weakening of those professional skills. And as you see in that diagram, a medical expert includes many different areas of impact. If you go into more details, I didn't share all the details, but all these particular characteristics of self-awareness, more inclusive worldviews, a sense of agency, more resilience, they are all capacities that are part of this CanMEDS framework as to what describes the aspiring qualities of a physician in Canada. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and now we will have time for your questions or comments.
Excellent presentation, Bianca and Lorraine. Thank you so much for providing a great presentation, sharing your research, sharing the work that's being done with respect to transformative leadership and self-reflection and the various other elements of the IEHP program as well too. So thank you again for that. With that said, we've received a couple questions. The first one is just related to, is this study currently published, and where can I get this study?
Yes, we are. This study is under consideration in the Journal of Immigration and Social Work, but we will share the results with you, with hopefully you and you always help us and support us in sharing the results of the research. So maybe the person who asked, we will be happy to share when it's being published. It takes a bit of time from submission to the publication, so we submitted recently. We are waiting now.
Research is research, right? With it as well, what are some helpful self-reflection techniques that individuals could use to understand themselves better on their own journey?
Lorraine, would you like to answer that?
I love it. Self-reflection techniques. I think just taking the time to pause, right, and to reflect on our words and our action is already a beginning to be able to take that distance. Certainly, I'll make a connection with what we do in the program. One of the self-reflection, we can say, techniques or exercises actually as they begin the program is to reflect on their own story, their personal and professional story that actually brought them to the program itself. And in reflecting on that story, to see then the strengths, but also the limits of what might be obstacles to their own ongoing learning and professional goals. And so it's an opportunity to take a really good look at that. And they're given a guided exercise for that. As for a technique, I would want to say there's different methods we can say for using reflection. And again, it depends how far that we want to go. So, but a starting point, I would think, for every opportunity for self-reflection begins with experience. It begins with a good look at what's really going on, what has gone on, what does that activity look like? And then to take a closer look at perhaps what's really going on. What are our own biases, we could say, or expectations that might have influenced that? So there are different methodologies for doing that, but definitely beginning with one's experience and with what perhaps one expected could be very, very helpful.
If I may add to what you said, I think journaling is a really useful tool for taking the time for that reflection.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, so that sounds like great techniques. And on the note of personal experience and work experience as well, if an international healthcare professional is given a job offer at a university, does this guarantee that the person will be hired on their original credentials applied with, or through a licensing loop? And even with the job offer, is it possible that they may not be accepted to the position once the person arrives here?
That, I think it's a question that is more difficult for us to answer, but I think that from the stories that we heard from people, I think that it's a different process whether you are offered a job before you come to Canada, and if that job is in the healthcare profession. So if it refers to a job in research or in teaching, that may, be according to different regulations, and it's not as difficult, I would say.
Right. Of course. From the research, what actions do you feel the settlement sector can take from the results?
I will start, and then I will invite you to share as well, Lorraine. I think that the work that N4 is doing is already contributing a lot to, and even the creation of this program is itself part of what settlement agencies are trying to do in terms of accompanying newcomers and especially in this particular case healthcare professionals to Canada. So I think that settlement agencies can create good accompaniment and support for people in creating networks and being able to connect to different organizations where they can find work, understanding the pathways, which is what N4 created already for them, and in a sort of a influencing policies, right? So I think that the results of this research point out not only to the, let's say, the quality of this particular program, but also the importance of creating good accompaniment processes for newcomers to Canada. And I would say it leads to this idea that as things are right now, we create, or there is a sense of responsibility towards changing the situation, right? As I hope that people who may read this, who are in charge of making decisions, they will be more aware of the negative impact on IEHPs' mental health and well-being in not being able to find a job.
Thank you. Not only being able to provide that understand and provide to them the Canadian cultural context, but also be able to take note what their experiences have been and what traumas we can learn from, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. And I would add to that, to build on what Bianca has said, is that certainly I think the role of advocacy is very important. And again, I want to point to, the work of the organization, the National Newcomer Navigation Network, that really has created, I think, a strong network of agencies across Canada that can together continue to advocate on behalf, of the IEHPs and of the healthcare system. Because, it's one thing to really offer a program to build their sense of agency and hope. And this is part of the bigger puzzle, right? And so how do you work then with other agencies in order to make change within the system? So it's all part, we can say, of a bigger system that we all needs to work together.
Right. Of course. And looking at the time, I believe we have enough time for one more question. Is community support a factor that ensures IEHP success? Is support within the community itself?
Well, I think that depending on how we define success, but I think that it contributes definitely to success, because it, from what we noticed in conversations with participants, on the one hand, it builds a sense of belonging and a sense of ease with oneself, right? Seeing that one's experiences are shared, but it also gives more access to information and to opportunities and to ideas. So I think that these are two essential elements for people to where a learning community contributes to their success. And I don't know, Lorraine, if you want to add something.
Thank you. And before we wrap things up, to jump into the final wrap-up slides, are there any final points of lessons or words of wisdom you would like to share with the attendees today?
I would like to thank participants in this research who made it possible, to present it today, and I also wanted to share my appreciation of the commitment and the intelligence of participants in this program. Like it's always very rewarding to engage with people with this deep level of knowledge and capacity to learn, and that makes it even more difficult for us in the frustration that people who are so intelligent and so committed and devoted to their work cannot find a position for themselves in the due time. So just wishing everyone success, and hoping to see some of you who may not have taken our program to see you in our program.
Yeah, no, I'd like to thank all who have participated in today's webinar. And I noticed in the participants, we do have some of our research participants today, so it's quite heartening to see, and hopefully you found yourself in this. And indeed, it is a privilege to be able to work alongside those who are seeking integration into the Canadian healthcare system. So thank you.
And thank you so much, Lorraine and Bianca, for an excellent webinar and an excellent presentation today. To jump into our wrap-up, again, thank you so much for taking time to participate in today's discussion and providing such informative research that will be provided within the next week or so with regards to a webinar recording. And many thanks to you, the audience, for joining with us and engaging with us today. You're very much welcome to join us again for any of our upcoming events here. And if you missed any part of today's presentation or would like to watch this session again, we'll be posting the recording to the N4 platform within the next week or so. We want to continue the dialogue that this presentation started, and we'll be moving any questions we didn't get a chance to address to N4's online moderated discussion forum called The Meeting Place. As well, we've curated several resources relevant and related to today's presentation topic, and you can find these in our resource toolkit, and we will link them when we share the on-demand version of this presentation. So if you haven't yet, please sign up to newcomerNavigation.ca for all our resources, all our learning opportunities. And alongside that, following today's session, you'll be asked to complete a survey, which very much helps us improve and seek out new webinar content that's responsive to topics that you're very much interested in. We kindly ask that you follow the link to complete this brief survey, or please complete the survey once you're directed to it once this webinar has concluded. Alongside that, we have many different pathways to practice in Canada that are relevant to ITPs and IENs, available for those that have trained abroad. Our ITP pathways and IEN pathways are available publicly to you, the audience, and to everyone. As well, we will be presenting on these pathways on February 28th with more info to come. Please stay tuned to our upcoming newsletters. Along with that, check out our N4 mobile app, available on Apple and Android devices through the QR code here, or through newcomerNavigation.ca/iOS for Apple and /Android for Android phones. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you again, Lorraine and Bianca. We hope that you can join us again at a future N4 event. Stay safe and stay well, everybody. Take care.